knowledge sharing, agricultural training, support video production. VIVEA production is committed to agroecological transition. In order, I'll start by giving a brief introduction to methanization, as you asked me to, and then I'll present the farm. Actually, we've worked on input self-sufficiency really throughout our journey on our farm. So we work a lot with effluents, especially with digestate, but as you'll see, I use other types as well. So methanization, in a few words, for those who aren't yet familiar with it, even though it's being talked about more and more, it's basically the digestion of organic matter. So actually, instead of being completely digested by the soil, here we have an anaerobic digestion of part of the organic matter, which produces biogas and then digestate. Just to clarify, the biogas represents about 10% of the weight of the digested organic matter, and the digestate about 90%. And of that 90%, there is also 90% water. And what's left is 10% dry matter in the digestate. That's it. So the digestate is essentially made up of water. As of today, there are about 1,200 methanization units in France, of which 850 are agricultural, spread out a bit across all the regions, but more particularly in the Grand Ouest region, mainly using livestock effluent, and more in our Grand Est, Hauts-de-France and Île-de-France regions, where the systems are more plant-based. These units started up about 10 or 15 years ago, initially to provide additional income and to complement the ways livestock effluent was being utilized. And today it has shifted a bit more towards the production of biomethane injected into the network. So now we're talking about slightly larger units that process more biomass. Keeping in mind that the biomass used in a digester must always be linked to what the farms can produce. And the word autonomy always comes up, whether it's for livestock, for cereals, or for methanizations, always that same word. It's very important. There you go. We can move on to the next slide. So the advantages and limitations of methanization. First, the advantage, well, we produce part of the fertilizers. Now, I do mean only part, because actually with methanization, the digestate is returned to the soil. If we are operating in a closed loop on the farm, nitrogen is exported through food production, so we lose some and need to replenish it. So either we bring in fertilizer or we bring in waste containing nitrogen into the methanizer. So this can be external wastes, they can be waste from other farmers, but at some point they will also need to be spread on the land. So we need to pay attention to closing the loop of the nitrogen and carbon cycles in methanization. So that's I'm going to emphasize that point. So we produce some of the fertilizers. We also produce local energy. All of this connected to a circular economy if we work with our local area. Income diversification is also interesting, especially since we're working with long-term contracts. So it's an energy that is purchased from us under 15 or 20-year contract. So this is something new in the agricultural system. And then there can also be additional calls for projects. That is to say, we often notice that farms with a methanization unit tend to shift or add value to their production in a slightly different way. So they are easier to set up, which makes it easier to diversify, easier to change the business model, and especially to rework their self-sufficiency. The limitation is that it shouldn't become the main activity. Methanization should complement the agricultural activity, but not turn the farm into a methanization unit. We must avoid creating conflicts of use between different sectors. Nowadays, that's starting to happen a little bit, where sometimes there are conflicts of use between materials that could be used for animal feed or for other energy recovery, and that would also go to methanization. That's something we need to be careful about. And we must not overlook the necessary agronomic adjustments, specifically regarding the carbon and nitrogen cycles. That is to say, at some point, when you build a methanizer, it will inevitably call into question some basic agronomic principles that Conrad mentioned earlier, and to which we really need to pay close attention. And then the investment, which has become very high nowadays, has resulted in a sector that is completely frozen and which will probably start up again, but with systems that are a bit different from what we have today. So today, for me, the focus on the farm is really about seeking autonomy. So, well, we met with Conrad back when we both maybe had a bit more hair, but we've come a long way together. The sustainability of the systems, that's really something that has shaped our farm. And when I talk about sustainability, I mean the sustainability of the soil, of people, and of our adaptation to the land. Then continuing to produce better with less and adapting to energy challenges, all while knowing that every farm, well, ours, for example, is different from Guillaume's. We're not at all in the same climate, not in the same pedoclimatic context. So we adapt to our own situation. We can move on to the next one. A quick introduction to the farm. Regarding how to say our background, we come from GAEC with two people where we've always done livestock farming on the property. We went through the dairy system from roughly 1978 to 2014. There have been several upheavals on the farm with people retiring and others coming back as employees. We stopped producing milk in 2014 and switched the entire farm to organic that same year, both the meat and dairy operations. What's unique is that we've always had grasslands on the farm. So the 120 hectares of grasslands are natural meadows that have never been plowed. And the area devoted to cereals has increased a little. We've been doing carbon assessments for quite a while now. Well, it's actually been going on for a long time. So in 2017, we did our first carbon assessment. So that allowed us to get a sense of how we could evolve on the farm. So in 2014, we produced 100% of our organic fertilizer since our biogas plant, and we'll talk about that a bit later. We introduced effluents and external waste. And in 2016, we started working towards fuel self-sufficiency again. And so today we've set up a small station where we convert a small portion, a very small portion, 5% of our biogas production into fuel, but that still represents 3 times the amount of fuel we use on the farm. Today, it is mainly used in vehicle milk collection trucks, school buses, private cars, but we also have gas-powered vehicles, including tractors. Right now, we have one for 2 months. We are currently testing a few things with it. And the projection, well, I can't see the whole page, but I think we can scroll my page a bit. The projection for the coming years is to regain autonomy over the processing of our products. And so in 2023, we're building an oil mill to process all of our rapeseed and sunflower seeds, as well as seeds from neighboring farms, so across the entire department. So now we have a contract with a partnership to supply organic oilseed cakes to a livestock feed manufacturer. And the last part of the project is the planting of orchards, heated greenhouses, and flour mills. And all of this is managed by SU Corp because we also believe that the sustainability of passing things on depends on having different models in terms of legal structures at the farm level. And in terms of crops, we have about 15 different ones. We have rapeseed, rye, hemp, sunflower, corn, einkorn, and then different types of wheat, winter wheat, spring wheat, and durum wheat, all of it organic. So our methanization unit is a 350 kilowatt T facility, as I mentioned, which produces around 60 tons of fuel per year. And we use about 25,000 liters in fuel oil equivalent. 50% of the input is agri-food biowaste, in addition to livestock effluent. Actually, I was going to say it's my fertilizer. Well, it's my energy production. It's the external carbon that I recover from agri-food waste. In fact, it's all the carbon we've been able to produce on the farm and sell as cereals and nowadays more as milk, but also as milk and meat, and we get some of it back. And in this waste, we also recover nitrogen. And actually, this nitrogen doesn't have any, it doesn't have any losses during the methanization process, but it does have a small advantage. We transform it into ammoniacal nitrogen and organic nitrogen. And both, well, I think Conrad explained it well earlier, ammoniacal nitrogen and organic nitrogen are very, very interesting for self-sufficient systems. So out of the 9,500 tons of inputs, we have 8,000 tons that are spread because there are 1,500 tons that are lost as gas, that are co-generated and or converted into fuel. And so these are spread on the farm or on the neighboring farm. But we also use other sources. We have manure that isn't methanized and remains as manure to be used on the farm for spreading without methanization, without digestate. So it circulates on the farm throughout the crop cycles. And in 2021, we started our first applications of wood chips. So we had 60,000 tons of wood chips spread, which are mixed with manure in the field. And so we have about 60 hectares that have been spread. The prunings are almost all returned to the fields on rapeseed, sunflower, corn, and part of the cereals. The rest of the straw is either taken for our own livestock or exported to farmers who bring us manure and on whose fields we spread digestate. Because for them who also have manure, digestate can also be an additional input. I've included this for you, but I don't know if we spend much time on it. This is just it's an example of the plots we have on the farm. We're at an altitude of 400 meters. These are plots that have between 20 and 35% clay. So with organic matter levels that are still relatively high, we are generally at a bit over 2.5 up to 4 without any particular problems, just a bit of hydromorphy. However, all the land is 100% drained. The digestate here, I showed you a photo, but really it's just to show you that digestate is actually even more reactive than mineral fertilizer. I always say with digestate, you could get close to the water course and you wouldn't have any problem with losses into the water. Unlike livestock effluent, digestate acts like an organic fertilizer. I don't know if you can read it on the little sheet I put next to you, but my digestate at home currently contains 8 units of nitrogen, and it has more units, about 2/3 organic nitrogen and 1/3 ammoniacal nitrogen, which suits me very well. There you go. Thank you. Next, the particularity we have at home, because we work a lot on the biology of the digestate, is that half of the dry matter is mineral matter. That's because we use a lot of diatomaceous earth in our digester, and diatomaceous earth allows us to digest organic matter even better since it creates a contact surface. It's like putting clay into a digester. So the digestion process goes much better. My goal with the digester is for it to produce as much energy as possible, not necessarily to return the most carbon to the soil. But since we have external waste, I try to maintain the carbon with my cover crops. So I always keep 100% of the surface covered, work only with remiel chipped wood, manure that is neither degraded nor composted, and supplement with digestate. That's a bit of a particularity we have compared to some other methanizers that mainly work with intermediate crops. The digestate, of course, since it comes from agri-food waste, we also have a lot of trace elements, sulfur, phosphorus, and potash. Today, we find all the elements in it. I've even stopped liming. Now, by stopping liming, we're actually even better in terms of earlier I had Guillaume who was talking about Guillaume Ducerf and bioindicator plants. Now we're actually getting slightly better flowers, whereas before we tended to overlime and had weeding issues. Next, I've included a few crops for you. This is just to show you, these are crops from this year. We grow quite a bit of soft weeds, about 50 hectares. It's really our main crop. Yields range from 70 to 30 quintals, with the average around 45 to 50 quintals. A little bit of spring wheat as well. We mainly grow it for its protein to mix back into our wheat to get a bit more protein in our blends. Little bit of durum wheat too. I've included some current organic prices for you, which have been the same for at least 3 years and are still valid this year. The wheeling systems are mechanical using tine harrow passes. The first and most important for us is a blind pass with a tine harrow, where we run the harrow 2 or 3 days after sowing the wheat, before germination has started, but at a time when the plants could still abort. The idea is to abort all the seeds, all the wheat seeds, a few days after sowing. And then the digestate is usually spread in February or March, along with the pass off. In corn is an interesting crop for us because it's allelopathic like rye. So we include it in our crop rotation to help clean the fields. That is to say, when we start having a problem with a lot of weeds, in organic farming, it's always a bit complicated. It's not easy. So einkorn helps break up our crop rotations. So einkorn yields are much lower, but the selling price is very good. So right now it's going very well. I'll join you afterwards. So we still have some crops that are sometimes not easy to grow organically, but since we now have more and more hoeing tools, these are crops we can still manage quite well. And knowing that with digestate, it really has a boosting effect. So we still grow spring crops like corn and sunflower. Here, this is a sunflower. This is this year's sunflower. You can see a few chinopods that made it through. It's not a problem. In the end, you get used to it. In organic farming, you also get used to having a field that's not always perfectly clean and to limiting the number of passes as well. For sunflower, like for corn, we often apply digestate, usually at the end of summer before the cover crops. The cover crops are rolled. We try not to plow too much, but it does happen that we plow anyway because we still prioritize keeping the field as weed-free as possible. And then they are sown with a single seed planter and followed by hoeing. This year, there was only one hoeing. That's why there's still a bit of lamb's quarters left. It's the same for the corn. You can see between the rows, there are still some lamb's quarters at the bottom. Here, the corn grew too quickly between the two hoeings, so we couldn't go in for the second one. There will inevitably be a few plants, some weeds. It's nothing dramatic. Once the corn has taken over, the weeds, as you see, we also use them as companion plants in other crops. Here, it's the same for the corn, fertilizing the cover crop with a pass-through in the spring, then sowing with a single seed planter and 1 or 2 passes with the hoe. This year, we only did 1 pass with the hoe rapeseed. Rapeseed is a bit special. We also hoe the rapeseed, so it's fertilized in the fall. It's the only crop that's fertilized in the fall that's to get very strong rapeseed. The stronger the rapeseed, the less susceptible it is to insects. Insects are no longer a problem for rapeseed here since we're going to have the ability. We hoe the rapeseed in the fall, but we still always have some weeds. And actually, in rapeseed, we see that there are interactions between the weeds. Here, we have a lot of black grass, speedwell, and chickweed. And the weeds can follow rapeseed all the way through without causing any issues. Chickweed and a speedwell that will be flowering in January, February. We reach the end of the cycle for those weeds. They'll take up a bit of nitrogen, but they'll give it back to me. For example, this year we weighed a biomass of weeds in June that amounted to 4 tons of dry matter per hectare, which was mainly a mulch of black grass, chickweed, and of what was its speedwell. We use a companion plant with a cover crop during the growing season. What we haven't yet implemented, but what Guillaume consistently practices and what Conrad is actively popularizing and strongly encouraging farmers to adopt, is the beneficial practice of sowing legumes as a understory crop within our primary agricultural fields. That we are going to approach gradually. We were missing the equipment on the hoe. Right now, the only legumes in our rotation are in our cover crops. We don't have pure stands of legumes in organic farming because we have digestate a lot of nitrogen. Today, for example, growing soybeans or fava beans doesn't work for us.